There are 5 civilizations here.
Hey Morgan, how you doing?
Hey Bradley, yeah, good mate. Self?
Yeah, well, thank you. Are you guys still have sort of social restrictions and everything, or you guys go where you want and do what you want within New Zealand? What's your situation?
No, we're good to go, mate. Everything's gone.
And people coming into the country, do they have to go through 2 weeks quarantine?
2 weeks quarantine, and if they flag that they've got COVID, then they're into isolation total, like a security isolation. So at the moment, you come in, you're quarantined for 14 days, and if you test positive, then you're off to a secure location. Yourselves, you're in Melbourne. It's still pretty tight over there, isn't it?
Yeah, Melbourne's yeah, the tightest restrictions in the world.
Yeah, you've got premiers over there, haven't you? Yeah, did he get that right, do you reckon, mate, in the beginning?
They got most of it right, but they made a few mistakes that caused the problem. We were good for a while, and then when they started letting people in, it came back in through the quarantine hotels, which is where it spread, and then the nursing homes. They did pretty good. They just blew a couple of things, and that caused the problem. But yeah, now it's kind of hard to relate to it all, you know, because there's so little of it in Melbourne, but yet the restrictions are still pretty severe.
Yeah, well, to be honest, Auckland only went down to I actually think no, Auckland are level 1, so they're the lowest. They're still in some form of restriction, but they only went to that last night. But so we're down to single digits as far as contaminations, and there's no community spread. So we're getting like 5 a day or 9 a day, and they're the people that are coming in from overseas.
Yeah. Is your inspections one-on-one, or can you do group inspections?
No, group, all yeah, back to normal. We like at the moment it's we got the lowest. This will be interesting for you. We've got the lowest listing stock in 20 years, mate. It's incredible, eh? It's just, yeah. But the turnover is, we're doing the normal turnover, so we're doing the same turnover of sales that we did 5 years ago for last month. And but we're not carrying 3 months stock. We're carrying 40 days if we're lucky.
Yeah.
Bit frightening, but it's good. The prices are going through the roof. Phenomenal prices. Like, we just refuse to price a property at the moment. You just can't. Even though we've got a finger on the pulse and we're seeing the changes, you know, the prices are moving every fortnight.
Wow.
It's give you an idea. So Nine Eye's sort of lower socio-economic, down the bottom end of Nine Eye. A 1-bedroom cross-lease joined that would have sold 3 years ago for 190, just sold for 465.
Crazy.
Yeah, and we got one under offer 2 weeks ago in Stokes Valley. So that went under offer in a multi-offer tender situation for 555, and it fell over on a builder's report. Put it back on the market, sold in 2 days, $600,000, $45,000 more in just over 10 days. It's an old fear of missing out over here at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you have low stock.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've had quite a lot of people log in. Can you make sure that if you're in, you've got your cameras on? Because when you speak, it means that you'll come to the front and that we can actually see you when you're speaking. So if you're on the link, if you could, I could see that a number of you have watched the video of at least 1 or 2 of the sessions, but at least one person's had trouble getting into the video, and we're a bit of a loss. Why? Has anyone else had trouble who's wanted to watch the video and has been unable to?
Bradley, do you mean the previous session?
Yeah.
I had trouble with the password and I was copying and pasting it, and I found that when I actually put it in manually, I was able to get in.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the problem.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Jack, maybe try that and see if that helps. It's funny because some people don't even have to put the password in, so we're a little bit of a loss as to why some people have to and not. You won't believe this, but it's absolutely true, is that there is no way to communicate or get help from Zoom on this. They will not, there's no chat line, they won't answer their phones, and there's no email responses other than to say, we're not answering emails. So it's impossible to get help beyond what it has on their website. So if anyone's having trouble, try to manually put in the password and let me know if you still have problems, and what we'll do is we'll resave the videos outside of the Zoom platform. All right, thanks everybody. Welcome. Exciting session of Covey. I just wanted to just quickly recap just a couple of key points from the last session, that we started with empowerment and the idea that with empowerment, if you feel like you can do things and make things happen, then you can do anything really. And empowerment comes from that self-belief, that feeling that you have the empowerment, you have the ability to make a change and make a difference. As we looked at it, we saw that one of the key components is understanding the circle of influence and circle of concern. Just as a quick recap, the more you focus on what you can influence, what you have control over, then the more you feel that you have control, and you push out that whole circle, creating a much, much smaller circle of concern, which is the areas where we feel like we don't have control. Like, for example, I wasn't happy with last session, as you guys know, and I've used my influence to say, hey, let's make a bigger effort. I want to help you to enjoy the course and to make the most of it. And we got, a lot of you logged in. I've had quite a few people say, look, I'm watching the tape, but I can't log in at the same time. It's fine, you're here, you're on time. We can't change COVID right now. We can't get stressed out about the fact that we don't leave our house much or that we can't go in the office. What we can do is work from within our circle of influence to make the best of it, to enjoy our time at home, to be more productive, to not spend time on the road, and to think about the positive things. Circle of influence just tells you that, you live within what you can. You don't focus on what you can't. You try to influence what you can. As I said to you guys on Monday, if you're not in a position to make a decision about something, somebody else is who you can influence. And you can get them to help you to then get to the decision that you need. The circle of influence, circle of concern is one of the first key concepts of Covey to support the idea of empowerment.
Here are 5 civilization eras, economic eras of humankind. And the technology is shown in each era. Hunters and gatherers, bow and arrow being the technology.
Sorry, hang on.
The fulcrum's in the center, put in 1 unit of effort. You catch 1 fish, you get 1 deer, you gather so many seeds, nuts, whatever, okay? You became a farmer. The fulcrum went over there a long ways, so that you put in 1 unit of effort and you get out 50 units of productivity. Can you imagine the social dislocation of 95% of the people being downsized? Imagine the new skill set they would have to learn, the new mindset, the new tool set. The industrial age, it put the fulcrum way over there, so that the industrial age outproduces the agricultural age 50 times. Specialization, mass production, efficiency, supply side management. So many marvelous things. And on that basis has come most of the economic and social progress of the entire 20th century. It comes from the industrial age. In fact, the farmers adopted the industrial model. And that's why an industrialized farm will outproduce a family farm 50 times. little over 2.5%, 3% of the people in this country feed the entire country. Imagine the social dislocation again. Imagine the downsizing, the re-education, the retooling. Can you begin to get the sense of what I'm talking about? Because we move now into the information, knowledge worker age. It's a whole different world, literally. It's no longer a world of controlling people. It's a world of unleashing people. I mean, take the accounting concept that came from the industrial age model. You are an expense. Coming to this, participating in this, is an expense. But if you buy a machine, what's that called? An investment. Isn't that interesting? People are an expense, things are an investment. That's the paradigm of the industrial model. And because most people are alienated and disempowered, then it puts the responsibility on who to do the so-called leadership and management? Those with formal authority. How do they do it? They carrot and stick them. Here's the carrot, here's the stick. If you produce, you get the carrot. If you don't, you get the stick. It's called the great jackass theory of human motivation and causes profound alienation.
We've all come out of that sort of thinking and right through school and everything, you know, and the whole modern management philosophy up and through the 90s was that carrot and stick. People can't be trusted. And then we started to see some real changes in the 90s. We see through the information age, sharing of much more information. People are more aware. We got rid of middle management. We got rid of a lot of the controls. We got rid of people reviewing what other people were doing. I remember when I first started at Fletcher's, there was one person whose whole job was just to review the work of the people in the marketing team as to what they did. That's all they did, is you did the work and I'll check it, because we didn't trust the people to do it. And I think we've seen a massive change in the last couple of decades, and I think Covey's had a big influence on that. This is one of my favorite concepts of Covey, and something to really come to understand, because it can influence how you think for the rest of your working life. It's a very profound sort of concept, and that is that we only have two things that exist. We have our production, what we do all day in terms of, we make accounts. If you're Jacqueline, or if you're Morgan, you're supervising and running a sales team, and you're talking to people, and we have what's called production capability, which is our capacity to actually produce. And we can only produce to the level of our capacity most of the time. Sometimes we can go beyond that a bit for a short period of time. We can put in tons of overtime or whatever. But basically, our production capacity puts in some boundaries, and we produce within that level of those boundaries. And when somebody's writing 300,000 in GCI, or they're managing 150 properties in a portfolio, and they feel full, I'm working as hard as I can, my day is full, I can't write any more than the 300, I can't manage any more than the 150 properties, then they've hit their production capacity. And then they start to get stressed, because they're just right up against it all the time. It's so hard, constantly, I'm just running out of time, constantly pushing. And the only way to help those people is to teach them how to increase their production capacity, which might be through working smarter, by using more technology to help you. It might be by getting in an assistant, thereby growing your amount of hours you guys have between you, and you starting to hand off things that are less productive, less dollar productive. In Property Manager, all of a sudden, I don't have to do maintenance as much. I don't have to do the leasing stuff. I've got somebody to do that. So now I can handle 170 properties. It might be technology, it might be learning, it might be changing the approach, it might be simplifying your procedures, it might be bringing in assistants to help. It might be upskilling yourself. All sorts of things allow you to increase production capability to therefore allow you to produce more. If you don't increase your production capability, you're just pounding the walls and getting more and more stressed. And so when I work with people, for example, whether I'm working with Andrew in property management, where we've gone from people managing comfortably 120 properties to now 150, 160, 170, because they don't have to do everything. They got more people helping them. So we've got property managers who are the most skilled people in the team, focusing on client relationships, on managing the actual landlord and the tenant once they're in place. And we've got other people who are less skilled, on less pay, doing other parts of the equation. Really helps. In sales, if I'm talking to a salesperson who's writing 300 and wants to write 500, then we start to look at, well, how are you producing your 300 now? You know, how many listings, how much prospecting you do, how many listings you're handling, how many sales you're making, and how do you feel? How many hours you're working? What are you doing? And we start to see whether by working a bit smarter, they could, within the same labor, they could actually increase their production a bit. Or if we start to identify that, you know, with what you're doing right now, if you changed your systems to do certain other things to make it more automated, then you could actually get to 400. But beyond that, you're probably going to need someone to assist you to get to that next level of, say, 600. And we increase their capacity. And when I work with big players in sales and get them from, you know, some guys from 180 to writing almost 3 million, or someone writing, you know, 180 to writing 1.5 million, it's about constantly looking at this capacity. And I remember going back years ago, Jeremy Desmere was a young sales guy at this point, and he was in a partnership with another lady, Dawn Kay, who retired, and they were between them writing 300 GCI. This is way back, you know, 20 years ago. So 300 GCI wasn't a great number, but it wasn't bad. But then Jeremy went out on his own, and I remember when Jeremy was writing about 300, and I was getting him to do things to grow that, and he came to see me and said, "I'm not servicing my clients as well. You know, I've hit this wall. If I'm handling these extra 5 listings or 10 listings, I'm not servicing the people the way I was before, and I'm afraid that I'm going to start getting some bad feedback from my vendors, and therefore it's going to come." And we had to look at how he ran his unit, how he was doing what he was doing, and we worked to get, and you know, ultimately got Jeremy up to 1.1 million by growing his capacity. Therefore, he wasn't feeling he was sacrificing his clients. And I can remember when I first spoke to him and said, "Jeremy, you've been at this for a long time, but yet someone like Tim Heaviside, who's barely been in it at all, is getting significantly more appraisals off his opens than you are." And Jeremy said, "Well, I only have enough time to work my database. I don't have time to do both." And I said, "Well, then you're hitting this capacity issue and you're never going to grow. Imagine if you could pick up another, Timbo picked up 78 appraisals off opens in the last 6 months and you had like 12. So look at what 60 more appraisals would end up being, you know, 1 in 3, 20 more sales on those dollars at the time. There's another 200,000 in GCI. Isn't it worth figuring out how we can increase your capacity so you can do that? Because it's there to be had if you just do it." And so we constantly re-engineer these sales guys' practices to get them from, you know, when I came to Fletcher's, we were busting at the seams to write 3 million, and, you know, pre-COVID and that, we're writing 25, 26 million. And actually, we don't have a hugely greater admin team to do it either. We just invested in systems and support and keep getting ability to do more and more. The idea of production capability, or PC and P, is a really, really important concept to understand. And when we look at first things first and we start talking about quadrants, we'll focus more on this again about where you spend your time. But if you're in a leadership position, your sales manager, your head of finance, you're running a sales team of 4 or 5 people that you're responsible for, or you're an agent who's got your own team, and you don't focus on production capability, then you never grow. You basically just have a lot of stressed out people, because as you want them to do more, they can't, I can't work any more hours. I love the concept where people say, I'm giving 100, I want 110% or 100. You can only give 100%, right? And you can't even give 100% for all the time because it wears you out. And so think about if your production capability can produce a unit of 100 and you're pushing up all the time on that 100, you get worn out. If your capacity could be 150, then you can get to 100 pretty easy. You can get to 120, 130 a lot easier because you've got the capacity to do 150. You know, if you think about it in a pure manufacturing sense, we have a production line and we can produce 100,000 cans a day in our production line. And we're running our production line 24/7. So why can't we do more than 100,000 cans? Well, maybe we have so many stoppages because of health and safety, because of maintenance breakdowns. So maybe we can make it safer. Maybe we can stop the breakdowns by doing better servicing of the machinery, and we can get to 110 or 120. That's it. If we were peak capacity running 24/7, we can only do 120,000 cans. Well, the only way to increase your capacity then is to add more production line, to add more equipment, to make the production bigger so you can actually produce more cans. And that's how it works, you know. If you're a printer, you have a printing press that can do 10,000 sheets an hour. You want to increase your capacity, you buy a printing machine that can do 20,000 sheets per hour. That is, if you're running 3 shifts a day on your first equipment, running, you know, 24/7, then that's okay. And you go, I'm running out of capacity, I got more work. Therefore, we can't run the machines anymore, so we got to get bigger machines who can do more. And that's why printers keep going up with their machinery, more and more color presses, more and more capacity because of trying to increase production capacity. So I really want you to come to understand this, that P and PC is incredibly important to understand how you help people to do better and how you help people to grow and grow their businesses within your business, how you help property managers manage more, how you help your finance people do more with the same amount of labor, how you help your marketing people achieve more outcomes. It's by growing that production capability. And the more you can focus on PC, the easier it is to get P. The more we just focus on production, we don't improve our capacity. We're just pushing up against walls. If anyone has any comments, you know, please let me know. I'll hear from Covey on P and PC. And we're gonna look at it again a lot when we get into the quadrant.
I have a really quick one, if I could,
Yeah.
Bradley. We have a salesperson. Ideally, we would like to get them to be spending 60 minutes with our clients. It's been tried, they get stressed out at 60 minutes. They feel they don't have enough time. So it's been changed to 75 minutes to, you know, obviously make them not as stressed and they're a lot more comfortable. Obviously, we would like to see more clients within a day, but as soon as you add a 15-minute time slot into each client's calendar, that's almost a whole client for the whole day. So is it more important, I'm going by the capability or the capacity thing here, is it more important to make her feel comfortable or to see more clients to get more money? Do you know what I mean?
Kind of hard to answer your question with that situation, but you know, you can't run people ragged. You don't want to shortchange your clients and have people do a bad job. It's quality over quantity. If they do 10 appointments in a day or in an hour or whatever it is, do them well, then that's what it should be until you can improve somehow to be able to do more in that time frame. Or maybe you're looking at the appointments and going, not all appointments are created equal. You know, there's A appointments and B appointments, and let's get the key person doing the A appointments and let's get somebody else doing the B appointments. You know, my daughter works and my daughter and son-in-law both work in the high-tech sales space where they work for software companies and they're remote salespeople. And there's all these hierarchies of salespeople in there. It's really fascinating. There's people who send outward bound emails all day. That's their job, to find targets to send outward bound emails. Then there's people who deal with the inward bound emails that come back, and then they try to turn those by email activity into somebody agreeing to have a phone call, which then goes to the third level of salesperson who actually talks to those people. And if they get anywhere with those people, they turn it over to their the closers who actually try to close the sales. You have 4 layers of people involved in trying to get a sale in these technology space, because you can put people at different levels. They get better and better at it, and they're worth more. They cost you a lot more. Therefore, you don't want them doing that other stuff. So there's lots of different ways to look at it, but you can't squeeze more into the tube of toothpaste than it's going to fit. You know, because all you're gonna do is make a mess, and you're either gonna lose your employee or you're gonna do not deal with the clients properly.
Thank you.
So this idea of circle of influence, and P and PC are a big part of it, of controlling what you can do and being on top of what you can do, is a task I'd just like you to spend a few minutes on. We've said 5 minutes in here of ways that you believe your environment and for yourself, people could operate more within a circle of influence. You know, how can you get people to take greater ownership over things? How do you get them to take more responsibility for their own environment? What's wrong with the environment that people don't feel that? Last time we talked about empowerment, and you know, and Ian, who was working in Dubai, was saying how people may not feel comfortable talking about, you know, autonomy initiative, you know, but I think most people do feel comfortable to speak freely. It's interesting for you to just spend a few minutes thinking, how can I live more in my circle of influence? And how can I help people around me in my environment live more in that circle? What could we do to create a more open environment where people feel like they have more control over what's happening? How could I have more control over what's happening? And then we'll just, after 5 minutes, we'll just talk about some of the ideas that have been brought up before we move on. So go ahead and spend a few minutes. You have your notes. Remember, we sent you guys a Word document with all of these tasks on there that you can use to capture your notes, so you've got them in one place. Okay. All right. That was just short of 5 minutes. About half of you still have your video turned off, and if you can turn it on, unless there's a reason that you really can't, you don't want to be seen, you have curlers in your hair or something, turn them on, guys. Who's got some comments? Let's be brief, just because everybody's environments are different, but it's great to see some ideas. Synergy, the sixth habit of Covey, 1 and 1 equals 3. What are some things that you can share with the group that you think would help, whatever environment you're in, for people to be feeling a little bit more within their circle of influence? Can you just shout out a few?
Bradley, I think being upfront and knowing what page the company is on is a good way to start. It encourages empowerment by doing that.
Yeah. So knowing where the company is too, like in their own view of things, is really helpful. So the more you hear from them, and like we try to communicate through our newsletters, 3 times a week about what's going on through our updates, and try to make sure people know. And within your own office, I think your directors in your office are very forthcoming about what the office is about, what it's trying to achieve, what the numbers are for everybody. Doesn't that help as well, like to achieve what you've just said?
100%.
Yeah, there's a philosophy that started in the 90s called open book management, where management shares numbers and things with people that prior to that just never did. So people worked in a vacuum, and you had no idea what the goals were of the company, what anybody wrote. I remember when I first came to Fletcher's, we didn't share any of the sales figures with anybody. And then when we started to share them, there was a reluctance of the directors to share their numbers. And I said, but you guys are the leading numbers. You're the role models. And if you can show how you can write 500 when the nearest salesperson's writing 1 or 200, then that's a real motivator. So I want to show everything. And so from the time I've got to Fletcher's, we've been very open book about our numbers. And all of a sudden it stopped becoming some mysterious thing. Nobody cared anymore. All right, that's what you write. That's what I write. And that's good, because that motivates me to want to write more. And how can he write more or she write more like that? What am I doing wrong? And who else has comments?
Bradley, I think that giving employees more feedback, not just the negative, but also the positive, leads them to feeling more comfortable to take on extra responsibility and maybe tasks outside what they normally do.
Yeah. Yeah, without question. People realize that if I do this and I get good feedback, then that opens the door to realize I can do more. Others?
I'll go, Bradley. I think having consistent team meetings and discussion. So in this circumstance, obviously over Zoom, but in the office, if you can, lock something in that's consistent, where the team has open dialogue and discussion. As far as sales go, they run through what they've listed, what they might be struggling with, and they all then kind of know what's on everyone's plate, I suppose. And then also one-on-one meetings with staff as far as with management, so they feel they have, I suppose, a space where they can speak freely and discuss their role, discuss any feedback or concerns without, feeling like it has to always happen in a group environment, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I always do is the people that report to me, I have a one-on-one weekly with them, and it might be 10 or 15 minutes or a half hour. Sometimes it's an hour, depending on the topics. But they know that they can talk about all the issues that they're facing, whatever's coming up.
Yeah.
I keep my list, they keep their list, and we do a pretty big exchange. And there's not a feeling of urgency during the week to have to speak to someone, because I'm going to talk to them on Thursday. I can put my stuff together, have a good old chat, and get out everything, answer any questions. So as you said, some team meetings, some individual meetings.
I
some
think that's good
one-on-one.
for time management as well, as far as being productive. You know, if someone knows they have a meeting booked with management, it's less likely that someone may burst into your office unexpected and need 2 hours of your time or something. So I think it would help everyone in that sense too. You know, when you've got to put that time aside, when you can prepare, rather than it being a last minute thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, when we get on to cycle time reduction, which is way in the future of these sessions about quality, we learn that for every minute interruption, the scientists have come up with the fact that it's a 3-minute loss of productivity. So for every one, you triple it. And so when you're interrupted throughout the day regularly, you think about how much productivity you're actually losing. And that's why a lot of people say, you know, if I get in at 7 and I work between 7 and 9 before anybody else is in, I get so much done. Or I stayed home today and I got so much done. I remember years ago, I had a partner who was the head of a department in a law firm, and he was a really good guy, and he was a really talented partner, and he was running several programs, and he was just inundated with people. And we sat down and we sort of worked out how could he improve this. And so we did a number of things. And one of the key things we did for him is that we gave him 2 one-hour slots a day where his team could actually come in and approach him. One was from 10 to 11 in the morning, and one was from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. And other than that, they weren't allowed to approach him or ask him questions or send him anything unless it was absolutely client critical, urgent, that he needed to know something or they needed help. Otherwise, everything was to happen during those time frames. Send in your queries, come in, knock on his door at that time, hold all your questions for one time and ask your 5 questions at one time. And his productivity just skyrocketed. That one thing alone, but we did several things, but that was one. But educating him on when he's available and when he's not, and him sticking to it made a huge difference.
For sure.
Yeah. So any others have got anything else they'd like to add before we move on?
I actually did this myself with work earlier this year. We had a new team when we brainstormed how we wanted to actually make our property management department look like. And then from there, we ran the workshop, so brainstormed all the things that we wanted to see change. And then from there, people were allocated particular tasks. They either had to research information and find out how we could make things better and how it will work better, or we worked as a team together to actually improve it. And it's moving into this COVID situation, it has made life so much easier for us. We have just smashed it, which is a really good thing. So giving people that responsibility and allowing them to have a voice and using that influence in that way has given them the empowerment to actually be in a positive culture that they know that they do have a voice.
And at the same time, that was working on a PC thing, production capability, and you improved the team's capability to do more. Anyone else before we continue on?
I would just say it's obviously connected with empowerment, and the more empowered people are, the more that they'll feel comfortable to work within their circle of influence. Like, I think you've got to give them the space both to obviously feel empowered, but, you know, I think one of the reasons why maybe people don't use their empowerment or their, you know, capabilities is that I think a lot of people are scared of decision making and scared of repercussions of decisions that are made. So if you can give them an environment where if maybe the decision wasn't the best one, they can just learn from it and not be chastised or whatever, if that makes sense, they'll be more likely to give it a go the next time, and they'll actually work more effectively for you because you've empowered them, you've given them the support that they need to sort of do their job. It's like, you know, one thing I like in our team, for example, whether it's, you know, Amy in CT, you know, she's quite a quiet person generally, but she's quietly confident. So if you give her the space to, you know, run CT stuff, that means I don't have to do every little thing. But she works within her circle of circle of influence. And if she needs me, she gets me. But other than that, she can just keep it going, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't give her that autonomy, then she comes to you for everything, and it's self-fulfilling prophecy that you have to do it all, and she loses satisfaction. She feels she lives in a circle of concern, and it's circular downhill in that scenario. And I think that's really important. I think there's a fine line in leadership between telling people not enough and telling them too much. And I know sometimes I can tell a little bit too much detail. And today, Caroline and I were dealing with a client issue, and I know she can handle the response. And I don't want to tell her how to do it, but there was a few things that she probably didn't know that we had done, and I went and put those in an email, and she incorporated that into her communication with the client. And so I mean, our goal is not to just disown the issue and disown our people. It's to empower them, to arm them with what they need to do better and to do more and to be more successful. And knowing when to shut up, knowing when to offer help, when knowing, all of those things are things you got to learn. And it's not black and white that there's one rule, because each person is different. Some people can handle autonomy better. Some people don't handle autonomy that well because they go outside what we think is common boundaries, and like they should know that's where their boundaries are by common sense, but they don't, and they go out here, and then if there is a problem, it could be a really big problem. And so you gotta look at each person where they're at in their development, and we're going to deal with initiative and all of that through the Covey stuff, but you gotta know where people are at and understand them and what they're capable of. And I think abdication is a very bad tool that managers use, and think, well, I've got somebody there, I'm going to abdicate responsibility and let them deal with it. That's not really delegation. That's not really effective management or leadership. What that is abdication, which usually leads to a problem. It's an example when I first joined Fletcher's, that Tim and Rob had a sales manager, and they pretty much abdicated a lot of responsibility to the sales manager, and he wasn't a good sales manager, and he created a lot of problems that Tim and Rob recognized. And when I came on, I said to him, look, I want to work with you guys. That I don't want abdication. We met every Wednesday with Tim and Rob and Tim's wife, Marilyn, who worked for us at the time, every single Wednesday from 12 to 2 for about 3 or 4 years. And we talked about the business. And every Wednesday we talked about things, because I didn't want them feeling like they hired me, so therefore they didn't have to be involved. I wanted them to be involved in our growth and our change and everything that we were going to accomplish in the future. And it worked that way. And before we move on, any last comments?
Hey, Bradley, it's Ian here in Dubai again.
That's fine, yeah. Hi, Ian.
Yeah, sorry to butt in. I think if you want to increase your circle of influence, you can use knowledge and data like learning, continual learning, lifelong learning. And by doing that, that's going to help you, give you tools to increase your circle of influence. So those two things, using knowledge, increasing the data, might be research reports on a different particular area, whatever. So those two things, keep going with the learning, and your circle of influence will or should increase. Also, one example here, a different thing is talking with others outside of your own immediate environment or your own comfort zone, and finding out what their issues are. So, for example, we have a department next door which deal with sustainability and recycling. And, because I met the managers there, I went and talked to them, and they said, well, look, we got these particular issues. We got to recycle all this packaging from generators, this and that, all these old asbestos materials, so we need ideas on this. And then I thought, well, what they did was they took some of the recycled materials and they built a bus shelter for their staff, and they air conditioned it because it gets very hot over here. So that was one way they can use to recycle their materials. But I could help them by designing buildings using their recycled materials for putting chlorinators in that we could, send throughout the town, have temporary chlorination facilities. So I've helped them just by talking to them solve one of their problems. You know, and they're not in my department, they're outside of my department. And so automatically I've increased my circle of influence. So that's an example, just to, you know, talk to others outside of your own area of influence and your own comfort zone and find out what their issues are.
Yeah, all of those are terrific examples of increasing your production capability, which makes you stronger, smarter, better, and more armed to increase your circle of influence. Spot on. I just hope you didn't use the asbestos in the bus stop.
No, you know what they use those for? They use them for like planter stands, pot plant stands, and that sort of thing. They made a beautification of the environment, so it's quite good.
Good on you. All right, we're going to watch a Covey video.
Okay.
Do you see any similarities between Saturday morning soccer and Monday morning at the office? I mean, think about it. Too often, teams and organizations are unclear about the goals their top priorities really are. Coaches and players are simply not on the same page. What you get is everyone just kind of running around in all directions instead of working together toward the same goal. The inability to take high-level goals and strategies of an organization and then to translate those into action is a major problem in most organizations. It's one thing to come up with great strategies and goals, but it's quite another to actually get them done. This is what we could call the execution gap. In a landmark study done by the Harris Polling Group, we discovered some revealing statistics as to why execution breaks down and why goals aren't translated into action on the front line. First finding, only 15% of those surveyed can actually identify their organization's most important goals or top priorities. Either there are too many goals, or they change too often, or they simply don't have any. And in most cases, they are vastly undercommunicated. Just because the leaders are clear on what they want to achieve, it doesn't necessarily mean that the front line where the action really happens knows what the goals are. After all, in a very real sense, the front line produces the bottom line. Second, people may know what the goals are, but too often they haven't bought into them. Only 19% surveyed say that they feel passionate about the top goals of their organizations. That's only 1 in 5. There are a number of reasons for this, but the primary one is that they feel no ownership. They don't feel that they have input into what it's going to take to achieve the goal. They simply aren't emotionally connected to the goal. No involvement, no commitment. Third, those surveyed reported that they spend only 49% of their available work hours on their most important goals. The rest of the time is spent on urgent, but far less important activities. They get so distracted by urgent things that they neglect the most important things. Finally, people might know what the goals and top priorities are. They might even buy into them, but they don't know what they are supposed to do about them. In fact, 51% state that they personally do not understand what they are supposed to do to help the organization achieve its goals. Goals will not be executed until everyone clearly understands what the goal is and what they themselves specifically need to do to meet that goal. Once people are clear on what the goal is, then and only then are they free to try new and better ways to reach that goal. So the point is, to achieve goals you've never achieved before, you simply need to start doing things you've never done before. You might ask, is it possible to dramatically and measurably improve your team's ability to reach its goals? Can it really happen? My answer is absolutely. Just imagine the impact when everyone on the team is crystal clear about what the goals are. Imagine the energy and creativity that would be unleashed when everyone in the organization is committed and involved in achieving the goals. Consider the economic impact when everyone on the team is spending the majority of their time on top priorities. Just think what can be accomplished when every player on the team knows exactly what to do. The possibilities, my friends, are limitless.
that whole idea of increasing your production capacity to be as productive as possible, you know, when you talk about organizations' priorities and top priorities and goals and your top priorities and your goals, if you don't know what they are, or you don't buy into them, or you're not working on them, it's pretty hard to have our production capacity and then our production going as well as we need it to. Therefore, your people aren't living in that circle of influence because the right things aren't being done. And it all sort of ties in together. This whole stuff about production capability, about where we're spending our time, about where our what quadrant we're living in when we get to quadrants, what circle we're living in, is it our influence, our concern? They're all tied together. And you can see that when we talked about change management, and that what's important for a person is to understand what the organization is about and how they fit into that and what they can do about it. And if you don't have that going, you really don't get the hearts and minds of people. And you know that yourself in your own role. So I just want to have you spend a few minutes looking at how you in your own role could increase your production capability. What do you think, and it doesn't mean in your circle of influence that you have the ability to just go and make the change, but you have the ability to influence people to help make the change that needs to be done. If you could look at your own day and think, all right, I can produce whatever 100 widgets is, but I think I should be able to produce 150. What do I actually need done different? What can I do to increase my production capacity so I live more in my circle of influence, so I can actually, what I'm responsible for, it might be not my direct labor, it might be my whole office, it might be my team, it might be my company, whatever it is, how can I make everybody more productive? If I can increase my production capability, we can then make people more productive. So what is that? So spend 5 minutes, if you like, writing those things down about how do you increase the production capability of what you have, you know, ownership over. All right, everybody, that's just about 5 minutes again. Would anyone like to share with me anything that they have come up with? Anyone?
Bradley, it's Mike.
Hi, Mike.
I think you touched on it before, like when you're talking about Jeremy, if you're wanting to grow and concentrating on PC to increase your P, but I guess you're looking at those other high performers, looking at their structure, their discipline, what are they doing to achieve that? And then I guess looking at your goals and timelines and breaking that down so that you've got a realistic idea of what those activities or disciplines need to be to achieve those outcomes. I think it's very easy for someone to sit there and say, I want to write $1 million a year, but if they haven't actually worked out how that's achievable by studying somebody else that's done it, maybe even getting them on board as a mentor or accountability buddy, and then breaking it right down to smaller achievable goals so that I know what to do each week to hit that target. I think that would actually help to increase everybody's capacity within an organization.
Yeah, that's really super valid. I mean, looking at those that have come before you and have done it, looking around at those people, your role models, and people who are doing what you do every day, but are doing it maybe twice or 3 or 4 or 5 times the number, is a powerful way to understand it, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel most of the time. Melissa's on my set of screens, and she's a good example in that she's running an office now, and they're a franchise, and often she comes across something she hasn't before, and the first thing she does is ask us if we have any precedents or any examples or issues with it before trying to go and figure it out, because why not? Because if it's there, that's what we're saving so much effort. And imagine how much PC is being increased when she's not having to reinvent everything. And so I agree with that completely. Mike, anyone else?
You just did my answer for me, Bradley. So thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, feel free.
Anyone else jump in?
Yeah, Bradley, Morgan.
Hey, Morgan.
Hey, yeah, probably for me, it would be doing structured one-on-ones with all my salespeople rather than 70% of them.
Do you do 70% because the 30% you can't be bothered because they don't really grow or change?
Oh, yeah, various reasons. Some of them are I think are at capacity and they're running well, and I'm better off to leave them alone. But some of them, for the reasons you mentioned, they don't change, and I think it's probably not worth my investing my time. But what we were talking about before, taking them through and showing them how they might be able to increase their productivity by increasing, their capacity. Yeah, I can see how that would work.
Particularly the ones that are full, because they're the ones who possibly would want to grow more than the ones that you can see have a lot of capacity, but yet they're not producing.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Anyone else got a comment?
Yeah, I've got a few comments.
Okay.
I think I'm talking more probably things that we've done in the marketing team as opposed to what we could be doing, but I think that it is something that we continue to do, and I think really that comes down to training more team members on those systems and softwares that we use, rather than it just being a sort of one-stop shop for one person to sort of attend to. We've now got, and making sure that we are continuing to train people, and I think that comes back to you will be able to increase your production capabilities if you are making sure that you have a backup as well. Obviously it's very important for us in marketing, but it also comes hand in hand with planning in advance. And just thinking about one of the examples when I first started, and Sarah and I were talking about how many emails were coming through to the marketing team, and we would spend maybe a good 20 minutes a day just clearing the inbox. And then we spoke to Nelson and we got all the emails pulled into one thing. That one of us just sort of went through every day. We all picked out the tasks and stuff that were assigned to each of us, and the inboxes worked amazing since then. I think it was a fantastic thing that we did, and that really helped every one of us, 6-8 of us in the team at the time, really increase our production capability.
Yeah, there's 2 different concepts you've talked about there, and the first one is you know, if you have two people and they can't do each other's jobs, they only know their own job, and if their job isn't full at that time, then they just sit around, twiddle their thumbs. But if they are cross-trained, they can always pick up and help the other person. And that's increasing production capability. When you give somebody skills to do more, you're increasing the capacity of the team. The other thing that you talk about is, you know, one of the things we look at in quality when we get onto it is about waste, things that take time, things that are just not productive, and looking at how you kill those, how you get rid of as many things as possible that are non-productive. And that's a really useful way to improve your production capability, because then you can focus on things that are important. It's a bit like saying to a salesperson, put everything that is dollar productive in one basket, put everything that's not dollar productive in the second basket, and figure out how to get rid of the second basket. Figure out how to stop doing those things or to delegate those things that are not dollar productive, and you can spend more time on dollar productive, therefore making more calls. Imagine, you know, if I can make 5 more calls a day and one of those a week turns into a listing, that's an extra $15,000 of revenue just from spending that extra bit of time. That might be a very simple thing to achieve. So this whole idea of increasing your production capability comes from focusing on what's important versus not what's important, trying to get rid of the stuff that's just urgent all the time, that's just these distractions, which we're going to get onto in First Things First. Any other comments before we move on?
Yes, I do. Okay, so I've got 5 things. So I'm talking about working as an independent sales agent. So first of all, I had asking for help, which you just touched on. Having been at Fletcher's for over a year now, the support both in terms of admin and marketing are remarkable, and I've got a much better understanding of that. So handing over the non-dollar productive tasks to either admin or to marketing. The other thing that I had was about analysis and setting up a regular ongoing time for me to sit down and consistently looking at that, you know, the business structure. So analysing my structures and removing the time wasting tasks that have little return. And when doing that, understanding, you know, my personality, I really took from what you said with our darling, I've just gone blank on his name, from over at Baldwin North. Jeremy, yes, with Jeremy, in terms of, you know, I am a particular personality and then there's another particular personality. So what you're good at and what gets raving fans, as well as what making time to create new fans. So, you know, taking care of those people while still prospecting and creating the new ones. So ensuring that, you know, making sure I've got the time in my structure to do that, and removing, you know, non-dollar productive things. I think too, another thing for myself is letting go of control and trust, and being very vigilant with myself of that. So allowing others to take control of items, but obviously still participating in that, but not micromanaging. And then the time management was a really big one. And in the time management, I saw how I've seen at Fletcher's how technology, our use of technology, has really helped us to free up time. And so embracing that more and making sure that I set aside time to learn it essentially.
Good on you. I want to pick up on one of your points, and they're all valid and good ones. Thank you. The first one about spending some time to look at your PC. You know, when you think about it, let's say the average salesperson works 50 hours a week. We don't tell them to, but they do. That's probably for some not even heavy, but let's say 50 hours a week. If you spent 1 hour a week looking at what's taking your time, what are your systems, using Dr. Fred's timesheet analysis of what you're doing every day, you know, if you spent 1 hour out of 50, that's only 2% of your time. And can you imagine in that 2%, how much productivity you would actually pick up over time by doing that. And so few people work on their PC. The people I coach individually do, because I make them look at their PC. But what most people do is they just keep producing. They just keep working, producing. And they're the ones who have the same real estate year after year after year after year. They never really grow or develop or change. It's people that work on their business, whatever department you're in, people who work on their job and work on their business are the ones who reinvent and get better and have more and do better and keep growing and all those things. So it's a critical part of it. Looking at the planning, like we talked about in the first change management session, spending, a couple hours of a whole year planning would make a huge difference for people. But spending 1 hour a week in combined, it might be 1 hour on its own, or it might be just the time you're doing to analyze what you're doing, for example. Like we've got all the terrific Dr. Fred documents, document everything you do every day to see what's in each of the quadrants, to see what's waste, to see what's good, to see what's dollar productive, and where you can kill your time and get rid of it. So anyway, very good point.
Thank you.
We might move on unless anybody else would like to add anything. This is Covey's 7 Habits. It's called the 7 Habits Maturity Continuum. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is where this comes from. And we're going to start working our way through this as we interface it with the principle-centered leadership to understand how they all fit together. But basically at the very bottom, you'll see that it says dependence. And Covey's view is if you haven't mastered the first 3 habits, which are the private habits, then you're dependent on other people to help you to do whatever you need to do. And you can look at children in that category, or sometimes mentally disabled people who are, or elderly, fall into that category where they are dependent on other people because they can't do these things for themselves. So our private victory, and I'm not going to go through what they mean at this point because we're going to build an understanding of all of them. But basically our first 3 habits to get a private victory is to be proactive, to begin with the end in mind, and put first things first. Once we've done that, we gain that independence where we can think pretty well and work pretty well on our own, but we still haven't proved that we can work with others in so-called public victory. So habits 1, 2, and 3 are our private. Habits 4, 5, and 6 are about working with other people in our public one. And so if we can think about win-win, in other words, what's good for me is good for you. Seek first to understand before trying to be understood, which is my favorite, and I think a really powerful one that most people don't know. Our 6th habit of synergize gives us interdependence where we can work together. We're now going to be good at not only working by ourselves, but we're actually going to be good working with other people. And I can think of a lot of people I've met over time that might have been good at their independence, their own private victory, but they weren't particularly good working in an interdependent way. And the 7th habit is sharpen the saw, continuous improvement. Ian talked about that earlier today, about always getting better. And I want to give you one real funny example. Is I worked in a law firm, and one of the departments had 5 partners in it. And when I first started, 4 of the partners were very dissatisfied with the 5th partner. And I found out why. He wasn't really doing anything. He was sort of working on his own and not producing. And I called him into my office early in my tenure running this law firm. And I said to him, what's the score? And he said, well, I like to think of myself as somebody who would be very good living in a cave and observing others, but staying away from the rest of the village. That was his summary of himself. Anyway, I said to him, well, that ain't going to work. And he said, well, what's going to work? I said, well, if you want to stay here and work in my firm, then what you're going to do is you're going to be billing at a level of at least a low-end partner, which was about 300, but you're going to run the team because you're the most mature, you're the guy with all the connections. The rest of the team think you should be running the team, and you're going to run this team and blah, blah. He did. And he said, all right, that's what I got to do to stay here. I'll get out of my cave and that's what I'll do. And he actually did. And he did a really good job of running the team. And he became quite interdependent with the rest of his partners again. He just needed a bit of a kick in the bum. Anyway, I've seen a lot of people who are good at that, working them by themselves, but not working interdependence. So we're going to work through the 7 habits as to how we achieve that. We're going to start with becoming proactive.
Work on these 4 assumptions. They deal with the 4 parts of our nature. For the body, assume you've had a heart attack. Now live accordingly. For the heart, assume that everything you say about another person they can overhear. Now speak accordingly. Always be loyal to the absent if you want to retain the loyalty of those who are present. Integrity means you live by the same set of principles in the totality of your life. For the mind, assume the half-life of your profession is 2 years. Now prepare accordingly. As we move into this knowledge economy in great speed, the constant need to invest in your education, experiences like this, online education, getting back into different training programs, school, constant need for it. And then for the spirit, assume you had a one-on-one communication with your Creator. Now live accordingly. The cultivation of these 4 parts to our nature develops at its highest level what I call vision for the mind. Vision means you have the sense of what's out there. You cannot see it, but you see it in your mind's eye. You see the potential in another person.
How powerful are those 4 things when you think about it? You know, like we don't think like that normally, but you always hear people who've had a stroke or heart attack, or they get some, form of cancer, and they completely alter their lifestyle, their eating, their habits, their exercise, because they're forced to. Or they're made redundant in a job that's been going into a dead end for a long period of time, and now they have to completely re-educate themselves, but they're spending quite a bit of time unemployed in the interim trying to get there. The idea of loyalty to the absence is a really powerful concept of always saying and doing the right thing by people. My daughter, when she was young, she was like in 3rd or 4th grade, and I was running this Covey course for people at work at the time, but not involving her. And I was sitting down with her one day, and we were talking about a friend of hers, and I said, how come you don't see Emily anymore? And she said, well, Emily is always bad-mouthing all our other friends when they're not around, and I wonder what she says about me when I'm not there, and I don't really want to be around her. I thought, how funny. That's loyalty to the absence. That's exactly what Covey is talking about. I think those things about, our mind, our heart, our body, and our spirit, and if we can act accordingly to those 4 principles, are pretty powerful. And the whole part of that, it's about being proactive. It's about thinking ahead and planning ahead with what you're going to do in all of these sort of things. I love this stimulus response, and I use it a lot in my thinking and in my coaching. And basically, we cannot control the stimuluses that happen to us, but we can control the response. The only way we can deal with stimulus is not putting ourselves in the wrong position. Don't go out late at night and walk in an alley. But basically, we can't control all the things that happen all day. People come into our office and drop this on us. This client thing happens. I've been trying to resolve 2 different client issues, in the last couple hours of Fletcher's, neither of which were my doing, but they both exist. There are stimulus I now have to deal with, and the response is, how do I deal with them? And you have control over your response, but you don't necessarily have control over the stimulus. In Covey's way of thinking, reactive behavior is exactly that. There's a stimulus, you just respond. And that is being reactive. But being proactive, I'm just going to shift the room. Sally's coming home now, and I'm going to be proactive and get out of the way so she can not have to hear me in there and all of that sort of stuff. Practice what you preach. All right. So Covey's belief, and I think this is awesome, is that by a number of things, sounds like a big echo in here, by a number of things, all of a sudden you have some freedom of choice. When there is a stimulus, if you are aware of your skill levels, you're aware of yourself, you've got a 360-degree view that's pretty good, or a 20/20 view of yourself, you've got imagination, you've got, you know, a conscience, you've got independent will, you've got ability to actually think through what should my response be. You don't have to be a Neanderthal and just have a response. You can have a measured response. You can think about it. You can come up with what is probably the best answer, or what are the options. And one of the things I've learned over time is that the older I get and the more experiences I have, then the more options I can think of, because I can understand the different sort of circumstances that can happen as a result of this. So if somebody raises A and you tell that to a 25-year-old, they only see 1 and 2. But you tell it to me and I see A and I go, I can see 10 different things that can happen from here. I can see all sorts of different situations evolving as a result of this. This is what this client's options are. They're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So let's think about, how do we mitigate that? How do we get it down to where we can control what they do? Same with staff issues. You know, when we have a staff problem, the more experience I have, the more I can see the things that I know can happen and go wrong, you know, and I'll never, ever be surprised at anyone's reaction, because you never really know how people are going to react to a circumstance. You can make assumptions and think, oh, this person will take this really, really well, and they don't. And so you have to have this whole idea in here of you know, free will, independence, you know, use your imagination, etc., that you can actually get the response you want to the stimulus that has been put on you. And the better the leader you are, the better the manager you are in the circumstances, the more you're able to help guide the situation to get to the best possible outcome. Using as many of the tools as you have, as many of those tools within your circle of influences that you can muster to get to the right outcome. And I think a massive difference between people who are really successful in resolving problems, who are great at taking best advantage of positive situations, getting the most out of them, are the people who are looking at this concept and being proactive about getting the best outcome. And sometimes you got to get ahead of the curve and do things to get the best outcome. As they say in America, the best defense is a good offense. Sorry, the best offense is a good defense. They both work. But the best offense is a good defense sometimes. I say to sales guys, if you know you're going into a listing opportunity and it's for a $2 million home, and you know that Jealous Craig are going in, you can absolutely guarantee that they're going to pull out their graph to say that they sell more $2 million properties than any other agent. So you can wait to be reactive, and the client says, oh, well, you know, I think I'm going to go with Jealous Craig because they sell more $2 million properties. Or you can be proactive and raise it before they even hear it from Jealous Craig and say, you'll probably find some agents tell you that they've sold more $2 million properties than anybody else. That might be true, but how many $1 million properties do you have to sell to actually be good at selling $1 million to $2 million property? Secondly, where's the advantage for you in that? What does that actually mean? And start to take them through it. Does that mean you think that they have the buyers because of that? Well, the reality is nobody has the buyers. The buyers aren't loyal to an agent, et cetera, et cetera. You know, you can come up with that. So if I think I'm up against it, I'm going to go on the defensive really quick and try to turn that before I have to do it later. Because in hindsight, when you have to respond to that stimulus of saying, I'm going to go with this agent because of A or B, you're on the back foot. Now you're having to sound like you're justifying why they shouldn't choose them. But if you do it ahead of time, for example, if you know an agent is going to say something bad about another agent, it's often useful to say that. You know, one of the things in helping you choose which agent to look for is which agents you feel had real integrity in dealing with them. Because there are agents out there who bag other agents. There are other agents out there who will knock on the door behind a board and, you know, do the wrong thing. And then when they do it, you're the hero. you look great. And they sit there in the lounge room and go, this is what they were talking about. You know, I don't want to deal with this guy. If he's going to be like that, or this girl's going to be bagging the opposition before they're even appointed to the role, I don't want to deal with people like that. Anyway, think about this concept. It's a really, really powerful one of being proactive is about having choice. The more prepared you are for the different stimuluses that can happen, then the better your responses will be.
Be proactive. The best way to understand a proactive person is to understand the opposite of a proactive person. That's a reactive person. A person who is a product of their environment. A person who is a product of other people's treatment of them. Who is a product of the weather, of the physical weather. Oh, what a miserable day. After all we had planned to do, now look at this day. Or a product of bad things that have happened to them, so that they wallow in self-pity. It's what I call the metastasizing emotional cancers, where they're constantly complaining and moaning about people and circumstances, and they get other people to validate them, to massage their hearts, and to swap war stories about how bad things are, how bad this teacher is, how bad this boss is, about my spouse, about this child. It's just a complaining, moaning attitude. And that happens with a lot of people. Most people grow up with a comparison-based identity. They really do get their sense of worth from people's opinions of them, how well they stack up to other people. And they just love being compared in a favorable way. And their security is external, not internal. The first three habits, the private victory habits, help to develop this internal capacity where your security comes from within. I'm telling you, once you have internal security, you've got the basis on which you can build good relationships with others. You've got the basis to learn, to listen, to be open, to be vulnerable. Why? Down deep, you're invulnerable. Down deep, you're not at risk. Why? Because you know yourself. You're the control of yourself. You're the master of yourself. You're a proactive person. You take initiative. You are responsible, not irresponsible, unable to control your response, like an animal. And some animals are very smart. And that consciousness can help a mouse work its way through a maze, help dolphins communicate miles away. It's just amazing. Some animals are so intelligent, so capable. But they don't have the one unique characteristic of a proactive person. Self-awareness. Where you stand apart from yourself, you're aware of yourself. You observe your own history. That means you're not your history. You can observe your own feeling or mood. That means you're not your mood. Who is it that's observing that? That's you. That's your true self. You are a self-aware person. See? You're not your even thinking. You're not your feeling. You're not your past. You're a product of your choices to your past. Yesterday does not hold today or tomorrow hostage. You have the power of choice. You can reinvent yourself. You are the creative force of your own life. Think of it. Think of what that means. Think of what you can do if you're aware of that.
You know, when I really relate to that in lots of ways, but I relate to it in that when I was young, 16, I worked in a supermarket, and I would be happy in a good mood. And then there would be some customer who'd come through who was just obviously having a really bad day, was rude, was unfriendly, hostile. And at first it used to put me into that mood, like, but then I realized, well, I'm in a good mood. Why am I allowing this person to take me out of that? I'm going to try to take them out of it. And I would just be even more friendly, and I would be more smiley, and I would try to change their behavior rather than them changing mine. And it made a huge difference to me in the way I conducted myself in those days, because when you had, 100, 200 customers coming through the supermarket, through your checkout, in that in your shift, you're going to get all sorts. You're going to get a whole bell curve of people's attitudes. And I wanted to have a good time when I worked. So I was very focused on having the right response to that stimulus. Our second habit is super, super, super powerful, and one that if everyone had this, and if you could teach this to your children, they would all be more successful. And that is begin with the end in mind. And it's not something that a lot of people do. A lot of people, go about doing tasks and things without really knowing what the outcome is or what they're really trying to achieve. You can talk to, I guarantee you can talk to 100 kids who have gone into university and ask them at the start of the university, what's the purpose of this degree? And probably 90% or more, whatever percentage of that 90 is, they could not really tell you why they're doing the degree, what job they could get from it. They can just say, oh, well, I wanted to go to university. My parents really wanted me to go. I like business, or I like arts, or I like philosophy. So you're doing a degree and you're spending 3 years and $30,000, and the opportunity cost of not working during that time, of earning $100,000 over that time, so $130,000 for what? To get a degree, or to actually have a future because of it? Why do we do a degree? We do a degree as a stepping stone to get the career we want to have. We're not living in some time where we just go and get a degree for the fun of it because we have nothing else to do. Most people could never tell you why they're doing that. And that whole point of beginning with the end in mind is really, really powerful. And we're going to look at, quite a few things about it. This is, I believe, quite a long video.
There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" The point of the fish story is merely that the most obvious, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about. Stated as an English sentence, of course, this is just a banal platitude. But the fact is that in the day-to-day trenches of adult existence, banal platitudes can have a life or death importance. The plain fact is that you graduating seniors do not yet have any clue what day in, day out really means. There happen to be whole, large parts of adult American life that nobody talks about in commencement speeches. One such part involves boredom, routine, and petty frustration. The parents and older folks here will know all too well what I'm talking about. By way of example, let's say it's an average adult day, and you get up in the morning, go to your challenging white-collar college graduate job, and you work hard for 8 or 10 hours, and at the end of the day you're tired and somewhat stressed, and all you want is to go home and have a good supper and maybe unwind for an hour and then hit the sack early, because of course you have to get up the next day and do it all again. But then you remember there's no food at home. You haven't had time to shop this week because of your challenging job. And so now after work you have to get in your car and drive to the supermarket. It's the end of a work day and the traffic is apt to be very bad. So getting to the store takes way longer than it should. And when you finally get there, the supermarket is very crowded, because of course it's the time of day when all the other people with jobs also try to squeeze in some grocery shopping. But you can't just get in and quickly out. You have to wander all over the huge, overlit store's confusing aisles to find the stuff you want. And you have to maneuver your junky cart through all these other tired, hurried people with carts, et cetera, cutting stuff out because it's a long ceremony. And eventually, you get all your supper supplies, Except now it turns out there aren't enough checkout lanes open, even though it's the end of the day rush. So the checkout line is incredibly long, which is stupid and infuriating, but you can't take your frustration out on the frantic lady working the register, who is overworked at a job whose daily tedium and meaninglessness surpasses the imagination of any of us here at a prestigious college. But anyway, you finally get to the checkout line's front, and you pay for your food and get told to have a nice day in a voice that is the absolute voice of death. And then you have to take your creepy, flimsy plastic bags of groceries in your cart with the one crazy wheel that pulls maddeningly to the left, all the way out through the crowded, bumpy, littery parking lot. And then you have to drive all the way home through slow, heavy, SUV-intensive rush hour traffic, etc., etc. Everyone here has done this, of course, but it hasn't yet been part of you graduates' actual life routine, day after week, after month, after year. But it will be. And many more dreary, annoying, seemingly meaningless routines besides. But that is not the point. The point is that petty, frustrating crap like this is exactly where the work of choosing is going to come in. Because the traffic jams and crowded aisles and long checkout lines give me time to think. And if I don't make a conscious decision about how to think and what to pay attention to, I'm going to be pissed and miserable every time I have to shop. Because my natural default setting is the certainty that situations like this are really all about me. About my hungriness and my fatigue and my desire to just get home. And it's going to seem for all the world like everybody else is just in my way. And who are all these people in my way? And look at how repulsive most of them are, and how stupid and cow-like and dead-eyed and non-human they seem in the checkout line. Or at how annoying and rude it is that people are talking loudly on cell phones in the middle of the line. And look at how deeply, personally unfair this is. If I choose to think this way in the store and on the freeway, fine. Lots of us do. Except thinking this way tends to be so easy and automatic that it doesn't have to be a choice. It is my natural default setting. It's the automatic way that I experience the boring, frustrating, crowded parts of adult life when I'm operating on the automatic, unconscious belief that I am the center of the world and that my immediate needs and feelings are what should determine the world's priorities. The thing is that, of course, there are totally different ways to think about these kinds of situations. In this traffic, all these vehicles stuck and idling in my way, it's not impossible that some of these people in SUVs have been in horrible auto accidents in the past and now find driving so terrifying that their therapist has all but ordered them to get a huge, heavy SUV so they can feel safe enough to drive. Or I can choose to force myself to consider the likelihood that everyone else in the supermarket's checkout line is just as bored and frustrated as I am, and that some of these people probably have much harder, more tedious or painful lives than I do. Again, please don't think I'm giving you moral advice, or that I'm saying you're supposed to think this way, or that anyone expects you to just automatically do it, because it's hard. It takes will and effort, and if you are like me, some days you won't be able to do it, or you just flat out won't want to. But most days, if you're aware enough to give yourself a choice, you can choose to look differently at this fat, dead-eyed, over-made-up lady who just screamed at her kid in the checkout line. Maybe she's not usually like this. Maybe she's been up 3 straight nights holding the hand of her husband who's dying of bone cancer. Or maybe this very lady is the low-wage clerk at the motor vehicles department who just yesterday helped your spouse resolve a horrific, infuriating red tape problem through some small act of bureaucratic kindness. Of course, none of this is likely, but it's also not impossible. It just depends what you want to consider. If you're automatically sure that you know what reality is and who and what is really important, if you want to operate on your default setting, then you, like me, probably won't consider possibilities that aren't annoying and miserable. But if you've really learned how to think, how to pay attention, then you will know you have other options. It will actually be within your power to experience a crowded, hot, slow, consumer hell-type situation as not only meaningful, but sacred, on fire with the same force that lit the stars. Love, fellowship, the mystical oneness of all things deep down. Not that that mystical stuff's necessarily true. The only thing that's capital T true is that you get to decide how you're going to try to see it. This, I submit, is the freedom of real education, of learning how to be well-adjusted. You get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't. That is real freedom. That is being educated and understanding how to think. The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant gnawing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing. I know that this stuff probably doesn't sound fun and breezy or grandly inspirational the way a commencement speech is supposed to sound. What it is, as far as I can see, is the capital T truth with a whole lot of rhetorical niceties stripped away. You are, of course, free to think of it whatever you wish. But please don't just dismiss it as some finger-wagging Dr. Laura sermon. None of this stuff is really about morality or religion or dogma or big fancy questions of life after death. The capital T truth is about life before death. It is about the real value of a real education, which has almost nothing to do with knowledge and everything to do with simple awareness. Awareness of what is so real and essential, so hidden in plain sight all around us all the time, that we have to keep reminding ourselves over and over, this is water. This is water.
Pretty cool, huh? I think that we rarely take time to reflect on how we think about things. We just think about them, they just happen, we just observe them, and they're just part of it. We don't take that time to take a step back and try to analyze that. And when you read the Covey book, 7 Habits, and I hope most of you have purchased it online or a hard copy and are reading it, there's a lot of really good examples and metaphors around his things that give you some really good, live examples of it all. I think that's really powerful because it's all about this idea of having an educated response to things. It's not just about stimuluses being there and you just have to react. It's about thinking ahead, planning for those, trying to get ahead of the curve, having options when they happen, so forth and so on. And I think, first habit of being proactive and setting yourself up relates to all the other habits. And so when we look at begin with the end in mind, we're still talking about being proactive about doing that as opposed to just jumping into things. Same with all of them. They're all proactive, gets us going. I'd like you guys to think about this idea of beginning with the end in mind. And one of my other concepts that I really love and I talk about a lot is idea and implementation, and that there only is idea and implementation. That's it. Just as there's only stimulus and response, there's also only idea and implementation. That is, you can have an idea or someone has an idea or we have an idea as a company, and then do we choose to implement it or not? And if we do, how well do we implement it? And we only have so many resources every day to come up with the ideas and so many resources to do implementation. And therefore, these two are critical. And when we look at this whole idea of begin with the end in mind, you think about, well, what should your actions and result be? Have I thought through all of the different situations that could come as a result of it? What do I need to do to actually get the outcome that I ideally want to have in the end of the day? And when you start to look at things like that, because you realize that there's only limited resources for everything. And if you think about this for a minute, if I was better at Zoom, I'd know how to use a whiteboard right now and draw you something, but I'll just tell it to you. And that is that if you think about this, and this is a really simplistic way to look at it, but it's the way I look at things. And you go, an idea, let's call it an idea to be how successful it can be from 1 to 10. And I'm going to say a 10 idea has the greatest impact. So a 10 idea is to take on real-time agent and have significant impact on the way we do business. That's a 10. An idea to run online auctions and use a certain system is probably not a 10, because we know that online auctions are not for the rest of our life. It's important we do them right, but it's probably, if we do it really well, it's probably an idea that might be worth a 5. How will we then implement those ideas using what the results should be at the end of the day, what can be the outcomes, what resources do we need, etc., can determine the effectiveness of that idea. So if we decide that implementing real-time agent could be a 10, and we put in all the resources we need to get it done, and figuring out what's going to be blockers and how we're going to get everybody using it and how we're going to keep using it for more and more things, and we do all of that and we do it really, really, really well. That 10, let's say we implement it to an effectiveness of 9. I look at it very simplistic and say, well, that's a 90. It's a 10 idea that we've implemented to a 9, and we get 90 points for that. And in the auction scenario where it's a 5, and it's not life and death for us, it's good that we can do the online auctions. We're going to have a few while we have all this COVID stuff, and we implement it to a 10 because we put in every effort we can to get it absolutely perfect. We get 50 points, almost half as many points as the 90. If we implement it to an 8 or a 7 because it's only worth a 5, we get 35 points. The more powerful the idea for creating what you need, the more focus should go on the implementation, because it's worth a lot more. The more points you can get, simplistically, on the more things you can do, the more you're going to win. And remember, we only have so much energy to do all this. So if I'm going to put my time in, do I put it into a 10 or do I put it into a 5? Most people don't think like that.
Hello, Connor speaking.
Hey, Connor.
Jim, yeah? Yeah.
Connor.
How are you, Jim? Yeah.
Jim, Connor, you need to mute your mic. I'll do it for you. There's an idea of working on production rather than production capability, right? All right. Now, idea and implementation is fundamental to your thinking in a management or leadership role. What are we going to focus our energies on, and how are we going to do it to get the right result? Because that right result will determine the effectiveness. Remember, 75% of change initiatives fail to achieve the desired outcome. 75% of them fail to take hold. So if you have an idea that is a 8, 9, or 10, and you don't do it to a certain level of an 8, 9, or a 10, then you're probably going to find that initiative fails. Because if you take an 8 idea and you implement it to a 6 level, that's only 48 points. And in that scenario, 48 points might not be enough to make it succeed, because you've made a big deal about it. This is really important, but yet people think, oh, this isn't that good. This isn't that effective. What if you take an 8 idea and you give it a 10 and you get 80 points? You made a big deal and people can see, hey, this is really good. This is important. This has been done really well. It's really an important concept. So as you evaluate ideas, often think about, well, if we're going to implement them, what's it going to take? Do we have the resources to implement this effectively? How much should we put into it? Is an 8 good enough? Usually, in my view, if you have a good enough idea, an 8 is good enough, because you get it going and then you improve it. Proposal point is a really good example of that, which I used in session 1, in that we made a decision, it's a 10, or let's call it an 8 proposal point in terms of overall importance. And if we implement it to an 8, we get a 64 points, which is enough to get us going. It's good. And then let's get it to a 10 by getting feedback from users, and let's turn it into an 80. And that's gonna work for us. And that's how we thought of that. And today, Beth released this afternoon all the changes that have been approved and have been implemented to proposal point for the team. And that's getting that next 9 and 10, making it more effective for everybody to want to use it. So begin with the end in mind is something that you wish everyone could approach and think about as they do things. And think about from your end, what have you done in your life that you wish you had thought more about the outcomes before you started? If you had really thought to begin with the end in mind before you took this on, what would it have meant? Just spend a few minutes and write down some ideas of things that would have been a really good time to actually really think about what I wanted out of this before I did it. Out of the jobs you've taken, education you've done, courses you've done, people you've gotten relationships with, you know, decisions that you make, all of those things. What's really mattered, right, in your life? And would you have done it differently if you really thought about that outcome at the other end? What do I really want from this? What do I have to put into this to get it to be what I want? Because I guarantee you, you've done things that could have been a 10, and you thought they were a 10 when you started, but because of the effort you put in, they became a 4 or a 5, and they weren't very important. And you think, oh, that should have been better. That should have been a better trip. That should have been a better course. That should have been a better this, but it wasn't. And that's because the implementation wasn't good. And other times, something you think is going to be great, it's a great idea, and you put this big effort into it, and it ends up really, in reality, the idea is only a 3, and you put a 10 into it, and you only get 30 at the outcome at the end, and go, that wasn't that good. That really didn't help my business that much. That really didn't do very much for me. Because the idea in itself wasn't that powerful. Make sense? And it doesn't mean that you should only ever focus on 10 ideas. You don't. There are plenty of ideas that may not be the most significant things you're ever going to do. They might only be a 3 or a 4. So you put in an equivalent level of effort to that, because you realize that this is only going to be a 3. I don't need to put 8, 9, 10 into this. If I put 5 into this, that's going to get me enough for what I need for this. You know, going to the supermarket isn't the same as deciding to renovate a room. You know, you don't have to put as much effort into your shopping list, because if you forget something, well, so what? If you buy the wrong thing, you take it back or you go and get something else. But if you're going to start to renovate a room and you're going to buy the cabinets and the paint and the carpets, you got to get it right. You got to put a lot more effort into that to get it right. It's far more important decision. So just think for a few minutes, couple minutes, of what in your life could you have done better by thinking with the end in mind when you started the idea.
Okay, who's got some comments, anything they'd like to, you don't have to share, but does anybody want to share anything on this before we continue on?
For me, Bradley, it was probably, like you said before, with the franchise situation, when our office and the two others branched away and became a franchise, and I kind of took on arranging everything that came with that. And so at that time, I put together a document of everything that it was going to entail and tried to plan out, well, this thing has to happen first in order for these 5 other things to happen. And yeah, I think that was definitely an instance of this where I had to begin that way to make any sort of progress and plan accordingly.
Yeah, and that's an instance where you did it. You actually began with the end in mind. Very good. Others who have ideas of where they didn't or they did, either one?
I think, Bradley, in anything in life is quite interesting. I've never really thought about it like that, but there's so many scenarios you can think of in personal life, whether it's building a house or something for your needs today, not anticipating what your needs might be in 5-10 years. So like I built a beach house years ago with no laundry, and which for a beach house, that's fantastic. Then like a year later, I'm thinking, well, what happens if I want to sell that? Who wants a house without a laundry? It's just really dumb things. So it's quite interesting long term.
Yeah, think of the options. We could live there. We could have it a holiday house. We could sell it. 2 of the 3 reasons you'd need a laundry.
Yeah, bizarre.
Fair enough. Anyone else?
I give a go, Bradley.
Yep, Connor.
Recently, with Blackburn Office, we started a book from Chris Helder, influencing people. I think something will be similar to this kind of mindset is like the sunset question. So ask yourself, where would you like to be? Who would you like to become in 5 years or even 1 year? Then you put the measurement in place, just helps you to really, progress. Secondly, another thing I think also probably like if we walk into a listing presentation, we imagine, the signatures in 1 hour time that will help us. Like when we play the soccer, I imagine this is the way I want to score the goal, that will help.
Yeah, very good. Very good examples. Not enough people plan ahead and think about where they want to be or what they want to do and where's this going to get me. And, I remember I had to laugh when I first started and I did one-on-ones with the salespeople, and one of them, a very powerful salesperson, one of those 3 gorillas I mentioned, came in my office and I asked him about his current listings. He said, oh, well, I was on a listing appointment Saturday night and I was in the house for 2 hours. And I thought, right, did you get the listing? Oh, no, we didn't even talk about real estate. We just had a nice chat about life, and it was a really good, rapport building session. And I thought to myself, to be frank, guys, what a fuckwit. Like, how could you go in and spend 2 hours in somebody's lounge room, not talk about real estate and not get the listing? Invest that much time, rapport building on what? On gardens and nurseries? You got to bring it back to property. Ultimately, what's the objective going into the lounge room? It's to convince them that you're the professional who should look after their needs. Anyone else? Either because you have thought of the end in mind or you haven't. Okay, we've got just a couple minutes left. I don't want to start another part of the topic, but I just want to come back to our maturity continuum and just come back to this private victory. When we think about it, we've gone through some understanding about 2 of the 3 requirements to get that private victory. We've thought about the idea of being proactive, of planning ahead, of thinking of the options, of going into a listing appointment and thinking, well, what are the options here? They either are ready to list or they're not. If they're ready to list, it's going to be between me and whoever else they're seeing. So I want to figure out who else they're seeing. I want to try to win that business and be ready to list it if I feel like they're ready. If they're not ready,
then my objective is to be able to get back in the door again, is to convince them that I've done the right things and I'm going to do the right things between then and the next appointment to get back in the door and win that listing. A second habit is begin with the end in mind. It's no use taking on activities and things if we haven't thought about what the possible outcomes of those are. Why are we doing it? What do I need to do to make it work? The whole idea of idea and implementation is everything starts with an idea. And you got to determine, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? If I do it, what does it involve so I can do it well enough for it to be a success? And a success might be a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10, depending on what it is. But I'm not going to do it if I'm not prepared to do it. You know, if I don't put in the effort to get the result I need, then it's not worth doing because it's just going to be a failure. It's just going to be something I've tried, but I haven't really committed to. So that's our first 2 victories. What I'd ask you to do between now and our next session is, if you haven't got the Covey book, 7 Habits, get it, because it's a really great read. There you go, Jane. It will really help cement a lot of these things. I mean, he's taking a lot more time in each of his chapters to go through these and give you lots more examples and lots more understanding. And it's a very, very powerful book, and you can get it hard copy or online, easy, audio, you know, whichever form you want. Again, if you're trying to watch the videos, make sure that you put the password in by number, not by cut and paste, and that might help. Any last questions, comments, thoughts before we finish up? All right, thank you all. I hope you enjoyed today's session. Thanks for all your input.
Thank you, Bradley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bradley.
Thanks, Bradley.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bradley. Thank you.
Bye. See you.
Have a good day, Ian.
Yeah. I thought there's some really great videos there. I really enjoyed them. Thanks very much.
Good on you.